accident due to the fact that Hamas has put a gag order on the news that comes out of Gaza, or because Hamas threatens reporters with life and limb. We now know that Hamas is quite successfully controlling the propaganda that is otherwise known as reporting on the war. So much for Jews controlling the media. But Hamas's control over the reporters on site in Gaza has nothing to do with the executives inside this building or the quote-unquote journalists reporting from Israel. Hamas has done nothing to prevent CNN and the other mainstream news outlets from getting the narrative straight. They have made a conscious decision to demonize Israel, to print faux pictures of dead Palestinians and bombed out civilian and UN buildings, and stories of a lack of water and electricity, all produced by Pallywood, with the support of these organizations that eat up the terrorist propaganda with abandon. The mainstream media is complicit in creating an immoral, false narrative that harms Israel and its survival as low information citizens across the globe, many of whom have anti-Semitic tendencies to begin with, consume and disseminate these dangerous lies. And it's not difficult to determine the truth about Hamas's use of civilians as human shields. UNRWA as a supporter of jihadist activities, tunnels constructed for kidnapping and murdering innocents, and the mainstream media as dupes in the propaganda war. The internet has altered the face of journalism as YouTube videos, tweets, and blogs quickly help disseminate the truth. The IDF has learned with each war that it is not just fighting Hamas on the battlefield in Gaza, it is fighting it on the world stage of public opinion. During Operation Protective Edge, the IDF disseminated videos illustrating its soldiers knocking on roofs prior to bombing a building, soldiers distributing flyers and making phone calls warning civilians to leave the area, and then abandoning strikes when they refuse. The interior of tunnels that hold the implements of war and kidnapping, including missiles, arms, IDF soldiers, handcuffs, and drugs to harm Israeli civilians. All to no avail, as the mainstream media prefer to publicize video clips of bloody Palestinian children without explaining that Hamas intentionally put them in harm's way. Of course, sometimes they pretend to provide both sides of the story. CNN's Jake Tapper had a clip on the veracity of civilian death numbers featuring Ben Shapiro of Truth Revolt and the always dishonest Peter Beinart duking it out. Boo! Tapper opened the segment stating, "One thing seems clear, more Palestinian children have been killed than Israeli soldiers. How dare he?" This is simply appalling, and Tapper is one of the least offensive reporters CNN has. Tapper didn't mention that his information was based on UN reports, but he failed to disclose, he did mention it was based on UN reports, but he failed to disclose that Hamas provides the UN with their numbers. Where was the report of why the children were killed, the ages of the children? Were they 16-year-old militants? The location of their demise, were they hidden in a UN school that's also housing rockets? I recently watched a video clip of the IDF searching a home in Gaza. As they enter the bathroom and open the cabinet below the sink, it looks perfectly normal, like our sinks, and underneath in our cabinets. But then they remove the cleaning and other items stored inside. They lift up the cover and they lift up the floor, and voila, there's a tunnel in a civilian home underneath the bathroom. Did you see that on CNN? No. And I am not sure how many of you have visited Palestinian Media Watch's website, but video clips abound of Hamas and Fatah representatives promising to annihilate the Jews, promising a Palestinian state from the river to the sea, and calling for death to Israel. Did you see that on CNN or read that in the New York Times? No. What about the Hamas combat manual that the IDF just captured and that instructs on the use of human shields? Have you seen mainstream media, news outlets, condemn Hamas for its actions rather than bending over backwards to justify its war crimes? What about the video and articles about life in Sederot and the poor people suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder due to survival based on 15 seconds to get to a bomb shelter? You haven't learned about that from the mainstream media. Did you learn about Hamas building a city underground using hundreds of tons of cement that could have built homes, mosques, schools, medical clinics, not to mention bombed shelters to protect their own civilian population. Each tunnel cost $3 million. There were over 30 of them. That's over $90 million. And there were 160 Palestinian children killed. Did you hear about that in the mainstream media?